Democracy town hall this afternoon. This is the third of 5 democracy town halls across Minnesota during this month of March. But before we get started, I'd like to just spend a minute and ground us in time and space. First, Lieutenant Governor Peggy Flanagan, our slated speaker, is with her family right now as they mourn the death of her father-in-law. So with her unexpected absence, we're very grateful that Secretary of State Steve Simon is joining us this afternoon in her stead. Also, in terms of grounding, it's important to acknowledge that the work of FairVote Minnesota takes place on ancestral and contemporary lands of Indigenous peoples. Our Minnesota was cared for and called home by the Ojibwe, the Dakota, the Northern Cheyenne, and other Native peoples for thousands of years. And this land holds great historical and spiritual significance for its original stewards. So we recognize the sovereignty and support the sovereignty of Native nations. And we recognize that colonialism is ongoing, and we have to build our mindfulness about our present participation in it. But as for today, here's the key. Democracies are not static. They are alive, and with or without our efforts, they continuously evolve. So the question is this: are we going to bend this democracy to be more inclusive and representative, or are we going to allow it to flounder down a path of misinformation, toxicity, and political violence? The fact that so many of you are here on this Sunday afternoon tells me that you're interested in the former, not the latter. For more than 2 decades, FairVote Minnesota has led the movement to empower Minnesota voters with more choices and more power in our elections. Ranked choice voting, we believe, is the key to that. And towards that end, FairVote Minnesota has mobilized thousands of volunteers, educated hundreds of thousands of voters, and secured breakthrough wins for ranked choice voting in Minneapolis, St. Paul, St. Louis Park, Bloomington, and Minnetonka. And we are simply among dozens of cities and states using ranked choice voting, including Maine and Alaska, cities in Utah and Texas, and soon New York City later this year. But even before the chaos of January 6th, we saw escalating momentum for ranked choice voting and other democratic reforms. And since then, we've seen how crucial it is to accelerate those reforms. That's the conversation of this afternoon. House File 89 and Senate File 218, chief authored by Representative Steve Elkins and Senator Kent Eakin, will take RCV statewide and give cities, school boards, and county commissions the choice to adopt RCV if they wish. These bills are so popular that they have clone bills in both chambers, and many of the authors are with us today. House File 9, introduced by Representative Greenman, eliminates barriers to voting and includes campaign finance reform to address the role of money in politics. And in addition to our special guest, Steve Simon, we have a terrific lineup of pro-voter champions this afternoon. Minnesota Senators Kent Eakin, Eric Putnam, Jen McEwen, former Senator Becky Laurie, Minnesota Representatives Heather Keeler, Dan Wolgamott, Rob Eklund, Liz Boldon, Jennifer Schultz, and local elected officials, St. Louis County Commissioner Ashley Grimm and Patrick Boyle, Moorhead City Council members Shelley Dahlquist and Steve Lindus, and Rochester City Council member Molly Dennis. Thank you all for being here. We need your leadership now more than ever. And now at this point, it's my pleasure to give the mic to Clean Elections Minnesota leader, George Beck. George has been championing the fight against big money in politics for years. And because was a resident of St. Louis Park, he helped bring ranked choice voting to St. Louis Park. Please help me welcome George Beck.
Thank you so much. My name is George Beck. I chair Clean Elections Minnesota, which is a nonpartisan nonprofit devoted to democracy reform in our state. I want to just briefly tell you what we've been up to this session. And as was mentioned, House File 9, Representative Greenman's bill, includes some very important issues for our state, like public financing, dark money contributions, released felons voting, automatic voter registration, and mailing of absentee ballots to all voters. The bill has passed through several committees and should make it to the House floor for action. Now, we also testified against the voter suppression in Senate File 173. That contains voter ID and provisional balloting. This bill has been sent to the Senate floor from the Finance Committee after a little bit of a fiscal note dispute in which the majority decided to rely on their intuition rather than the numbers in the fiscal note, which were pretty hefty. Ranked choice voting, of course, will be heard in the House Local Government Committee on March 17. That's House File 89. We strongly support it as the fairest and most democratic way to elect our public officials. Its antithesis, Senate File 708, which is a prohibition on ranked choice voting, which we opposed, was heard in the Senate State Government Committee and laid over without any vote. We still hope to see hearings coming up on national popular vote and redistricting reform, which has been pretty quiet so far. We want to thank Secretary of State Steve Simon, not only for a safe and successful election last year, but also for his strong leadership against the attempt to narrow the electorate to the benefit of one political party and to the harm of the voting rights of the people of Minnesota. Thank you.
Well, thank you, George. Appreciate your remarks and updating us. And here's a brief overview of our agenda for this afternoon. First, Secretary of State Steve Simon is going to share his thoughts and his work in ceaselessly protecting and defending democracy. Then we're going to hear from our state senators and representatives on reform efforts at the legislature this session. And then we'll have Q&A with all of you. So please submit your questions to Jean Massey via the chat box, and note that we're going to be selectively directing your questions to our legislators. So now here's FairVote Minnesota Executive Director Jean Massey to introduce our special guest. Jean.
Well, thank you so much, Maureen, and for your service to the efforts around democracy reform here in Minnesota as the chair of the FairVote Minnesota board. And it is my total pleasure to introduce our special guest tonight, Secretary of State Steve Simon, who on short notice said, yes, I'd love to be able to join you this evening. So thank you for being here. Secretary Simon is our state's leading democracy champion. As he likes to say, he's in the democracy business, and there is no one more committed to defending, protecting, and strengthening our democracy than he is. He started his career in elections as the chair of the House Elections Committee before he ran for Secretary of State. And among the many democracy measures he pushed for in the legislature was a bill to allow local governments the freedom to adopt ranked choice voting if they wished. I've had the opportunity to work with Secretary Simon over many years and have seen his dedication to the democratic process and to the determination to preserve it up close. I can tell you that there is no one better equipped to help lead our elections at this moment when our democracy has been under attack. He has been at the forefront fighting the disinformation campaign about the 2020 election, as you probably all well know, and it has continued to threaten the core of our democratic tenets. Trust in our democratic institutions and procedures is the foundation of a resilient democracy. Secretary Simon understands this and has been traveling across the state and the nation via Zoom to ensure voters have the facts about last year's election and know the truth about the integrity of our election system. Like many other state legislatures across the country, the Minnesota Senate is pushing draconian voter suppression measures and efforts to ban local control on ranked choice voting. Secretary Simon is having none of it, and his calm, confident way, he is making sure these measures never become law. We are grateful for your service and commitment to democracy, Secretary Simon, and for your time with us here tonight. Please join me in welcoming our Secretary of State, Steve Simon.
Thank you very much, Jean, and thank you to all of you for being here. It's great to see a lot of familiar faces, including my former constituent, Judge George Beck, who you just heard from a moment ago. And I really want to thank you and thank my former legislative colleagues who I see on the call here, and the legislative members of the legislature now who are involved on this call and involved in democracy work. It's very, very important work. As you heard Jean say, I often say, I like to say that we're in the democracy business, and it is a heck of a time to be in the democracy business. As I'm sure you know, you wouldn't be on this call if you didn't share that view. These are essential issues. All roads lead to the ballot box. No matter what issue someone cares about the most: environmental protection, racial and economic justice, jobs, schools, roads, all roads lead to the ballot box. And if we don't get people into office who share our views and values, we aren't going to get very far on any of those issues. And we've been through quite a journey over the last year. And I just, for a few minutes, because I don't want to stand in the way of what is a very important discussion with legislators and others, but I've been asked just to give a very quick overview of where we've been, where we are, and where we're going in very short order. And again, I'm happy to stand in for Lieutenant Governor Flanagan. FairVote Minnesota, as you heard, is doing a series of these, and I was slated to be on, and still will be, on another one of these, just not this one. And we join her in mourning the loss of her father-in-law. And we wish peace and comfort for her and for Tom Weber, her husband, and for their whole family. So let me talk a little bit about what we've been through. And some of you know this, you've lived it, you've observed it, but I just think it's important to put it in perspective. This last year was a real trial for democracy in many ways, including at the administrative level. All elections are intense, and they're supposed to be intense. There's nothing wrong with that intensity. We shouldn't shy away from that. Elections are supposed to be a clash of ideas and personalities and approaches and experiences. Presidential elections are even more intense for all the obvious reasons. The stakes are high. We're choosing the most powerful person in the world. But when you layer on top of all of that, a once in a century pandemic, we knew we were really in for an election for the ages, just from an administrative standpoint. And I want to thank so many people on this call who joined me in one particular strategy, one particular way that we think got us through in very good shape with this election. And that was simply to embrace and encourage something that was already in Minnesota law, thanks to many of the people on this call or on this meeting. And that is the ability to vote from home without any sort of explanation or an excuse. That was a bill that we passed in 2013. I was chair of the House Elections Committee at the time, and it was really the key to us getting through in such a position of advantage this year. Let me just, I don't want to bury you in numbers, but let me give you a number that to me really put things in perspective at the very beginning of about a year ago. About a year ago, we were looking at one another in our office and around Minnesota and saying, well, we've got about 3,000 polling places statewide. We're expecting about 3 million voters statewide. That averages out pretty neatly and cleanly to 1,000 people per polling place. That's 1,000 people and their droplets circulating in relatively closed quarters for a 13-hour period from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. I don't know about you, but where I vote a few blocks away from where I'm sitting here in Hopkins, Minnesota, in the basement of a church. Low ceilings, not a lot of room, not a lot of air circulation. Some of you maybe vote in larger, atrium-like spaces, and that's great. It's probably not the norm. And so we knew we had to do something. And so we took advantage of the law that we have on the books to encourage people to seek out and use that method of voting. Not to say that anyone who voted in the traditional vote was bad or a worse citizen or anything like that, just that people ought to consider voting from home or voting absentee in some form. And we knew we were onto something in mid-May. Every other year in the election year in mid-May, our office opens up the web portal to allow people for the first time to start ordering those ballots to come to them at home where they live. You don't have to, but if you want to, you can go to that website, which is mnvotes.org. And so we opened it up in mid-May. In 2016, the last presidential election, after the first week of that portal being open, you know how many people out of a state of 5.6 million people signed up in the first week? 88 people. In 2018, it was just a little over double. It was about 200 people. In 2020, it was over 36,000 people in the first week. First week, 7 days. That told me we were really onto something, that's the way people wanted to vote increasingly this year. So I'll fast forward, I'm skipping a lot of steps, but in November, we got 58% of voters to vote that way. 58%. That means only 42% of voters voted the traditional way in a polling place on a designated day in a designated place, only 42%. That tells me, and this is why it's relevant, I think, to FairVote Minnesota's many and consistent efforts over the years, is that when people try different ways of voting, whether it pertains to the ballot itself or the method or the place in which that they vote, they tend to gravitate towards those changes, at least temporarily. Minnesotans are quite flexible about the way they vote. They want to vote. We are voters, we are doers, we are joiners, and we want to be involved in that. But Minnesotans, if given the chance to have an array of choices in the manner in which they vote, they will opt for that choice. They will opt for a fuller menu of choices so that they can adapt to the way that works for them. And so that's one of the reasons we enjoyed great success. And you can't argue with the numbers. Minnesota, for the third time in a row, #1 in America in voter turnout. We were just shy of 80% in the middle of a once-in-a-century pandemic. So not only were we #1, not only were we a high point for Minnesota since 1956, a personal best since 1956, that all happened in the middle of this, in the middle of COVID. So that tells me Minnesotans want to vote, they will vote, they leaned into this election. And so that's an important consideration going forward. Look, we're at 80% in #1, and that's great, but we can't break our hands patting each other on the back because we still have 20% who aren't voting. And we know that not every community, demographic or geographic, not every community is voting at those sky-high numbers. And so we've got a lot of work to do, even in Minnesota. We can't just rest on our laurels. We've got to be experimenting. We've got to be broadening. We've got to be giving people more options to vote, more options to get involved and be interested in voting. But it's a hard climate right now, as you heard some people allude to. We are in the middle of a ceaseless, relentless tidal wave of disinformation about the 2020 election. We saw it come to its perhaps natural conclusion or a natural conclusion on January 6th with the storming of the US Capitol by people who have been misled, to say it diplomatically, about the outcome of the 2020 election. But I think at a minimum, all of us have an obligation when we encounter that kind of disinformation and those kinds of lies to speak truth and to say what the truth is. And here's the truth. It's simple. The 2020 election in Minnesota and elsewhere was fair, accurate, honest, and secure, period. Those are the facts. And that's not just me talking. That's former Attorney General William Barr. That's the FBI director appointed by former President Trump under oath 2 weeks ago in front of Congress. That is 60-some lawsuits that sought to move the election one way or another and that were utter failures. And that's the result in Minnesota, at least. I can't speak to other states, but in Minnesota, of consistent and constant self-examination of post-election audits, post-election reviews, and the like, which have turned up nothing of consequence or significance that doesn't match the results that we saw on election night. So unfortunately, though, there are those in the Minnesota legislature and elsewhere that are leveraging that disinformation. They are leveraging those lies and leveraging that disinformation to make voting harder, to shut out potentially tens or hundreds of thousands of eligible voters in Minnesota. And that is something we can't tolerate. And I won't stand for it, and I know neither will you. So we have legislators here who have been bold on these issues for years, and newer ones who are on this call. So I know that they're bold and eager to push back against that kind of disinformation. And so we're here in part, I know, to talk about how we can make our already good system, our already high performing system, even better. And let me just return the compliment to Jean Massey and to Maureen Reed and to George Beck and others who have been in this democracy space for years. They have done an amazing job of mobilizing, of organizing, of messaging, frankly, in terms of the democracy business that I'm so proud to be a part of, about ways that we can make our democracy better, ways that we can make it more inviting, ways that we can make it less of a zero-sum game where it's, kind of an all or nothing proposition. And ranked choice voting is a key part of that. As you mentioned, as Jean mentioned, I used to carry the bill, as some of you are now carrying or co-sponsoring, that makes it easier for local jurisdictions to adopt ranked choice voting, because we have this two-tiered system right now where many cities and local governments have to go on bended knee to the legislature if they even want to experiment with ranked choice voting, which has always struck me as just wrong and unfair. So I want to thank FairVote Minnesota for its part. I don't want to be a spoiler and talk in the weeds about ranked choice voting in the current legislation, because I think legislators want to do that. I just want you to know that I and my office am always available to you on all of these democracy fights, all of this democracy work. It's very important going forward. We've got a good thing going in Minnesota, but we can't just rest on our laurels. We've got to be in a constant mode of self-improvement, getting at that final 20% and making democracy even more inviting for even more people in Minnesota. If any of you ever need to get a hold of me, let me give you just my personal office email. There is no gatekeeper, there is no filter, there is no screener. These come only to me. And it's just simply steve.simon@state.mn.us, steve.simon@state.mn.us. Please email me anytime. Happy to get on the phone then, chat about any of your ideas, feedback, pushback, anything you got. But thanks to FairVote for a truly heroic effort. It's just getting started. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary Simon. We know you have the back of voters, and know that we are in this battle to defend and protect our democracy with you every step of the way. As you said in the very beginning, all roads go through the ballot box, and we are making sure that our democracy works for all of us. So thank you for being with us. I know you can't hang on, but we do have one question already in the chat box that I'm hoping you might be able to address before we move on with the rest of the agenda.
Sure.
And by the way, for those of you wondering if he really does respond to his emails, trust me, any time of the day, he will respond to his email. So please do not hesitate to take advantage of his offer to email him. So a question relates to the bill that's moving through Congress, HR 1, and whether or not that will overrule all the voter suppression laws that are being now tried and passed in states across the country.
Well, I'm a big supporter of HR 1. I think it's a once in a generation opportunity at major democratic reform, and we need it because we're also encountering a once in a generation attack on democracy and on voter rights. You've heard the statistics. As of today, I think it's 240 or 50 something bills in multiple states. Sadly, states in which these aren't just show bills or messaging bills. These are bills that have the support in legislative chambers and among governors who can enact them into law that would take us backwards, literally turn the clock back on common sense, simple reforms that once, not so long ago, enjoyed broad bipartisan support. Let me just give you one quick example. In the state of Georgia, they are seeking to get rid of no excuses absentee voting. Now that's something that we adopted in Minnesota in 2013, and other states, many states have adopted since then. In Minnesota, when we had that bill, as those of you who were there will remember, Candigan, I know, you and I and others, in 2013, it had broad bipartisan support in both the Minnesota House and both the Minnesota Senate. Democrats and Republicans embraced it. There was no need any longer in Minnesota and any other state, as far as I'm aware, to make someone give a state-sanctioned excuse from a list of state-sanctioned excuses if they wanted to vote from their couch or vote from home or vote absentee. So we joined many other states in doing that. And now in the state of Georgia and others, I'm led to believe, where they actually have the votes and could do this, they want to go back to an excuse only, where you can only vote on a day other than an election day and a place other than your polling place if you certify that you are too sick, too disabled, or you're out of town. And that is turning the clock backwards. And we know what that's all about. We know what that's all about. HR 1 would not, HR 1 would not get rid of what I would consider what every species of sort of oppressive or regressive or backward looking election law, but it sure would go a long way. So I support it. I think we got to acknowledge, though, it faces a challenging path in the Senate because it would require, under the current rules, 60 votes. So it would require getting rid of or creating an exception to the filibuster. So, but I support HR 1. I think whether it's campaign finance reform, whether it's things in it that model and copy Minnesota, things that we already have, like same-day voter registration, things like no excuses absentee voting, things like online voter registration. It would mandate that for the rest of the country. We've been there for years, so it's kind of flattering that they're modeling a lot of what we have, but I support HR 1 and it would go a long way. I wouldn't say it would completely extinguish, but it would go a long way towards overcoming some of the legislation that we're seeing and have seen in recent years.
Great. Well, thank you so much again, Secretary Simon. If you're able to stay on for any amount of time, we will have more questions that are probably helpful for you to answer. And when you need to go, we understand that you couldn't be with us the whole time. So thank you once more. Again, everybody, a round of applause for Secretary Simon. Thank you. And now we have an opportunity to hear from the legislators in the area who are working hard on so many democracy fronts. And we've got a great lineup, as Maureen shared earlier on. And I'm just going to go through one by one and call on you. And each of you will have a minute or two to speak to your passion for democracy, your efforts around ranked choice voting and other democracy reforms right now. We get to begin with Senator Kent Eakin, who is carrying the bill, Senate File 218, in the Minnesota House. Senator Eakin, welcome and thank you for all your efforts.
Well, thank you, Jean, and thank you, Secretary of State Simon. We served together in the House, and I'm so happy that he's in that position, especially at this critical time when democracy is under attack right now. And we can't take for granted the democracy that we have. We do need to demonstrate, as Maureen Reed said, that our democracy is alive, and not only alive, but growing stronger. And that's why this bill is so important. You know, I've taught social studies in the past, and I remember reading a book about our democracy and how other countries always look to us as the leader to follow in democracy, that we were the laboratory of democracy. And this writer wrote that now, unfortunately, there are many other countries that look at us as being the museum of democracy, the way democracy used to work, that we have not been evolving. And that's so critically important, as Maureen said. I mean, in order for our democracy to thrive and survive, we need to continue evolving and strengthening our democracy. And this is a great way to do it. This is one piece of it, but it's a very critically important piece, the ranked choice voting, to ensure that the will of the people prevails. That's really all it's about. And I think we need to make sure we have a very coherent, understandable message that we're delivering to the people, and explaining it to them in a way that's understandable. This really is an instant runoff system. I think people understand what a runoff election is. We're just simply doing a runoff election more efficiently and more effectively, and in a more cost-effective way. I think that we can make the case, a strong case to the people of this country, that the will of the people should prevail. Look at the corruption that's been taking place under the current system, and we've seen it in the last election year. We know that people have been recruiting third-party candidates for no other purpose than to simply siphon votes away from another candidate so that they can win with a minority of the vote. We need to stop that, and this is the way to do it. And I think one way to simplify the message, I've also put out another bill for a constitutional amendment that simply states you must win a majority of the vote in the general election in order to hold office. I think if we just simply lay that principle down first, obviously instant runoff or ranked choice voting is the most effective way to accomplish that goal. So with that, again, it's all about making sure that the will of the people prevails. And that's what our country has always been about. And I want us to reclaim the mantle of being the leader in the world that other countries look to as to how democracy should work.
Well, thank you, Senator Eakin. We are with you all the way and couldn't appreciate your leadership more. Next, we have with us new Senator Eric Putnam, who is a co-signer of the second clone bill around ranked choice voting in the Minnesota Senate. We have actually a clone bill in the House. It's so popular. It's 39 total authors in the House and now 10 in the Senate. We're going for a third clone bill in the Senate as well. That's how popular ranked choice voting has become, and we're really excited by that. Senator Putnam, please join us and provide a couple of minutes of remarks about your efforts around this issue and others in Minnesota.
Sure, thanks, Jean, and thank you all for being here, and not just tonight, but back in October. Virtually every phone bank that we had, I would see someone with a little ranked choice voting icon behind them. So because you were there, I get to be here. So thank you very much for your work on democracy now and then. I very much appreciate it. As I was driving back to St. Paul this afternoon, and on the radio was St. Stacey Abrams, and she was talking a little bit about some of the stuff that Secretary Simon was mentioning. She said there are over 250 bills, anti-democracy bills in different legislatures around the country right now, over 250, and there are 50 alone just in Georgia. And the kinds of things that they are trying to do are absolutely absurd. Limit the number of hours that polling places can be open. There is nothing that has anything to do with voter security in limiting the number of hours that a polling place can be open. It is regressive, it is anti-democratic, it is morally repugnant. And one of the things that I think I was thinking about as I was driving here, as I was listening to her, was that we do need to keep up the policy battle. We do need to change the actual practices of electoral politics, like ranked choice voting, like maintaining absentee ballot options, and exploring more and more options, as Secretary Simon's been mentioning. But I think we also have to work on a culture of democracy too. I think we need to have the practices in place, but we also need to campaign differently. We need to treat each other, I think, a little bit better, and we need to motivate other people to get more involved in politics. To me, that's one of the best things about ranked choice voting, is that more people will run for office. I think, to me, that is the core responsibility. Obviously, I've only been a senator for 2 months, but for me, the core responsibility that we have as elected officials is inspiring other people to want to take our job. That is our fundamental responsibility, is to empower other people and then get out of the way. And I hope that as people in office, we can fight for those changes and for those laws and those rules to make the practices of voting more efficient and more democratic. But I also hope that we all can work a little bit harder on developing a culture of democracy, where voting is seen as being as powerful and profound as it is, where participating in politics happens every day, not just the day before an election. So I'm eager to keep doing this work with you guys, and I'm grateful for seeing you all here today. And I'm looking forward to continuing to fight.
Well, thank you, Senator Putnam. For those of you who may not have followed his race, he too had a third-party candidate in the race and eked it out, of course, thankfully, representing St. Cloud. But those dynamics are very harmful to democracy, especially when candidates are run in a way that is not earnest. And ranked choice voting really addresses that spoiler problem. So thank you for your work around democracy. You're a strong champion, and it's just what Minnesota needs right now. So thank you. And next we have Senator Jen McEwen from Duluth. Senator McEwen, are you with us? Can you provide us with a few remarks? She too is a co-signer on the ranked choice voting clone bill. Thank you very much for your support, and we're eager to work with you in the year ahead.
Thank you so much, Jean. It's a pleasure to join everybody today. I really am enthusiastic about ranked choice voting, and I have been for a number of years. And one of the reasons that I have been particularly hopeful about ranked choice voting is a couple of reasons. There's a lot of reasons that a lot of benefits, but is that spoiler effect. But I guess I would address it from a different angle, and that angle would be that on many issues, the American public actually has some very progressive views and what we would call progressive views, but around healthcare, around the way our economy works, the whole spectrum, housing, that as we know, and my own political orientation tells me that we have been neglecting a lot of the basics in our society for a long time: transportation, healthcare, housing, the climate crisis, environmental issues. So there's a number of things that have been held up in large part because of corporate cash spending, but also because of our binary political system, where if you have somebody who is going to push progressive issues that many people actually support, there's always the fear of them being a spoiler. So they may not enter the race, they may be persuaded to not run. People may not vote for them even though they want to vote for them because they're afraid of that spoiler effect. So I'm very interested in ranked choice voting because I believe that it will facilitate our being able to move our political spectrum back to perhaps a more normal place. It is, my opinion is that we have been moving to the right over my entire adult life, frankly, since the 80s. We've been moving further and further to the right on the political spectrum. And while the rest of the world has gone forward and moved on and provide things like healthcare to their population as a right, and have better protections for their citizenry in regard to corporate capture and consumer protections and housing and safety net and all sorts of areas. So we've really fallen behind, and I hope that adopting ranked choice voting is one of the tools, as people have said, that would facilitate greater democracy. I really do believe that as we strengthen our democracy and as we take advantage of the tools of democracy, that we will move forward in a very positive way. And so I'm hopeful about that. And then the other piece that I really like about ranked choice voting is how it facilitates civility. That as we debate these policy issues, we're always, as elected officials that are running for office, cognizant of really wanting to appeal to the broadest spectrum possible and wanting to run a positive campaign because we are really trying to connect with everyone. And so I really appreciate that about ranked choice voting, because if you're running for office, that even if you're not someone's first choice, you're going to try to be their second choice. You're going to try to do as well as you can with as many people as you can. So that the way that ranked choice voting works, I really appreciate that about it. That it fosters positivity, it fosters cooperation, it fosters really trying to work collaboratively with people. So thanks so much for having us here today. It's been really nice to listen to the speakers and to hear all about the work that people are doing. So I look forward to working with everyone going forward. Thanks.
Thank you, Senator McEwen. What a great enthusiastic voice, and thank you for your leadership. Awesome. We look forward to working with you in the year ahead to accomplish this goal as well. Next, we have Representative Rob Eklund, also from the Duluth area. Representative Eklund, are you still with us?
I'm here, Jean, and my constituents might not like the Duluth area thing.
Sorry.
I'm way up on the border. That's all right. We're one Minnesota. That doesn't matter. No offense, Senator McEwen or Representative Schultz. I know you're on there. Jean, and everybody, thanks for having me on. I gotta tell you folks, first off, Jean has tracked me down at virtually every convention that we've been at over the last several years and talked to me about ranked choice voting. And I finally committed this year to learning more, and I'm fully in support of the concept. And I'll give you one good idea right off the start is why. In Ely, Minnesota last year, we had a mayor race where the mayor won. The guy that won the race didn't want to be mayor and had tried to withdraw, and he withdrew too late. So he won against an incumbent. He decided he didn't want to be mayor. So now we got a special election in Ely. We've got 6 people running. Well, our small communities can't afford to have a primary and a regular election and to be sitting with an appointed mayor till Secretary Simon, I think it's sometime June or July before they'll finally get the race done. So this is where, with 6 candidates, this is a prime example of where ranked choice voting would work correctly and properly for a small community that really doesn't have the resources to put out the funds to have that many elections. And I mean, basically, there'll be three mayor elections in less than a year for that small city. A lot of things have been mentioned already, but I'll talk first about third-party candidates. If we hadn't had the third-party candidate down in the Shakopee area, we'd have Representative Brad Tapke still in the House rather than the current representative that we have there. That it seems like all he wants to do is create havoc in the legislative process. It doesn't look like anything else is outside, or he has any other goals. So if we had ranked choice voting, these third-party candidates wouldn't have nearly the effect that they did on this race, especially. And then what I've noticed this year in the legislature, when you see especially what's happening, getting some traction over in the Senate on voter ID, we resoundingly turned that down on a constitutional question a few years back. It's a waste of time and money and effort. I fully believe that the voters spoke, and we shouldn't even be revisiting that. But we have 250 plus types of legislation across the country. It's already been mentioned several times. And I think it is not that it's not that the GOP is necessarily interested in governing. I think they're interested in winning and ruling is what they want to do. And so that's why I'm so hopeful that we can beat back some of these voting reforms, if we put it in quotes, that they're trying to do, because as Secretary Simon mentioned, Secretary Barr, or Attorney General Barr, said it flat out, and he was former President Trump's handpicked Attorney General to protect the presidency, has said this was a free and fair election. That's what we need going forward, and I think that we all need to strive to continue doing that. And I look forward to working with all of you and moving forward on these efforts. Thanks so much for having me on, and I'm looking forward to the questions.
Thank you, Representative Eklund. I'm most proud of my perseverance in continuing the conversation with you, and we're so grateful for your support in signing on to the legislation in the House. It's very meaningful to people across Minnesota, and especially your district. Next, we have Representative Heather Keeler with us. She has been driving from her home in Moorhead to the Capitol, so I believe she is now in a safe place to talk with all of us. Representative Keeler, are you on the line?
I am. I'm
Awesome.
hoping that you all can hear me okay.
Yes. Oh, and we get to see you as well. That's great.
Yeah, in my traveling office. Well, yes, for me, all the things that everybody says, that's great. All the things that people are going to say, that's great. But I come from a lens of being a minority woman who's grown up like truly understanding that voter suppression is alive and well to make sure that people like me and communities like me, that our voices don't get heard. And part of that is the representation that we see in leadership, but also voter suppression against voices like ours is from a space of fear. There's this fear that if we start to have the capability and the ability to show up and have our voices heard, things will change. And so for me, being a part of the democracy business is brand new for me, but I've been living the downfall of a lot of this. And so I stepped up, and again, Jean reached out to me right away when I announced that I was running, because my endorsement process was through ranked choice voting. And I'll tell you, the one thing that I appreciated about it, it was still very relational. It allowed me the opportunity to call my community members and learn about them and talk to them. And if they were going to choose me as their first option, it was a way for me to ask for them if I could possibly be their second option. And so it didn't create this us or them mentality that I feel like elections are really scary, especially if you're from an underserved population where you feel like you don't belong. So I think ranked choice voting creates a space that's more welcoming for more candidates like me to step into this arena. It's really scary to do things in spaces where you don't typically belong and that has fought so hard to keep your voice silent. And so for me, that's what I hope to do in all of this, is continue to work towards a more equitable opportunity for everybody's voices to be heard, but not only their voices to be heard, but once you're heard and you know that you're seen and your voice is valued from a voting perspective, then that's when we start to encourage and we inspire new candidates to run. And that's when our leaders start to actually genuinely reflect who our populations are. So it's been a a fast year of learning. And I appreciate all of these opportunities, and I appreciate the conversations and the lenses of life everybody brings to the table around this, because this really is creating an opportunity for everybody to be seen, heard, and valued on all levels. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Representative Keeler. And if you're able to drive and answer any questions, just let us know. Just text me and we'll make sure that you're brought in. And safe travels back to the Capitol. Another really strong voice in defense of democracy. We really appreciate it. And last but not least, we have Representative Dan Wolgamott, who has been a big champion of this reform for a very long time, and other democracy issues that he's carrying this year. Representative Wolgamott, are you still with us? Oh, no. Well, if he comes back on, I'll make sure that he is given an opportunity. He really is a champion of a lot of important work this year, and we'll make sure he has an opportunity to speak. Oh, here he comes. He got lost, but he's coming. Bear with us. Representative Wolgamott, are you back on? While he's connecting, let me just recognize a few other elected officials who are with us here tonight from communities and from county commissions across the area. We have St. Louis County Commissioners Patrick Boyle here with us. We have Moorhead City Council member Deb White. And anybody else who's come in who would like to make sure we know you're with us tonight.
I see Representative Liz Boldon is with us.
Liz, oh, that's awesome. Representative Boldon is with us as well. Representative Boldon, would you like to say a few remarks?
Sure, I will be brief because I want to be sure that we get time for questions, and just I am so supportive of ranked choice voting. I don't want to miss an opportunity to just join into the conversation and be supportive of it. And so I represent District 25B, which is Northern Rochester, and I just agree with everything that has been said. You know, we need to defend and support and strengthen our democracy. I think there are few things as important as that right now. And ranked choice voting is one way to do that. And I am supportive of it for all of the reasons that have been, already discussed. I would say perhaps the most important for me is the inclusivity of it. And I really appreciate Representative Keeler's comments about that. And just making sure that we are bringing in voices that have not been historically highlighted or have had the space previously. And so I appreciate that with ranked choice voting, the folks who win are the people with the most broad support. And it does create more of that sort of civility. And as was said, if we aren't somebody's first choice, we certainly want to be their second choice. And so appreciate those aspects of it as well. So happy to be here, and I look forward to the conversation.
Thank you, Representative Liz Boldon, and she's from the Duluth area. So we are grateful for your voice. I believe Representative Wolgamott is back with us. Are you here? Go ahead and unmute, and the screen is yours.
So Jean, I see that he is here, but it may be that he is having some connection issues.
Yeah, maybe I'm getting a text that he's here.
I personally understand, having had the experience those today, as we all have had in this past year. So
yeah, he's having trouble. So we'll just continue on. And now is an opportunity to hear from all of you and entertain questions that you may have. We have a whole lineup of legislators, and I think Secretary Simon may still be with us to answer your questions. So put them in the chat box. And while you do that, I want to introduce, we have one other special advocate here with us tonight, and that is Vicki Barnes. She works with the America Promise effort to around the 28th Amendment to undo Citizens United, has been working hard in that arena. And I would just like to ask Vicki if you would take a minute to describe the progress that is making here in Minnesota and across the country, and who's carrying the legislation around that work. Vicki?
Thank you. Thank you, Jean. Thank you, Clean Elections Minnesota and FairVote. An ideal amendment proposal will have broad bipartisan support and enable Congress and the states to set reasonable limits on campaigns, elections, and ballot initiatives. And in doing so may differentiate between natural persons and artificial entities. The broad bipartisan part is the sticking point. In Congress last year, the Democracy for All Amendment finished in the House with 221 co-sponsors. We needed 290. In the Senate, it finished with 47 co-sponsors. We need 67. Of all those co-sponsors, only one was a Republican. Although most Americans of all political persuasions support this amendment, it is not reflected in our state or federal legislatures, and that is our challenge. 22 states representing 48% of the population, and over 830 local governments, including the city councils of Minneapolis, St. Paul, Duluth, New Brighton, Lauderdale, North Oaks, and Chaska, as well as the Sherburne County Board of Commissioners, have passed resolutions calling on Congress to pass an amendment. Bills in the Minnesota State Legislature will be listed in the chat. And thank you to the supportive legislators on this call. Working on local and state resolutions helps to prepare Minnesota to ratify once Congress passes the amendment. And we want to be able to act as quickly as possible when that happens. 2/3 of Congress and 38 states is a high bar, but Americans have done this before to overturn bad Supreme Court decisions, 8 times, in fact. This must happen. Our future depends on it. And I understand that on this call, we have Senator McEwen and Senator Putnam have both signed on to clone bills, I think, in the Senate, and Representative Wolgamott is a chief author of a bill in the House that calls for a constitutional convention to pass the amendment.
Thank you so much, Vicki. It's really important work that we force open that conversation at the constitutional level. Meanwhile, hopefully we can do some additional work around campaign finance short of a constitutional amendment, but that's the big goal. And I think our democracy is headed in the direction of working around ranked choice voting and campaign finance and all of the issues. It now is receiving the kind of attention it deserves, and we're all working towards those ends. So thank you. Representative Wolgamott, if you're on, you can have the floor now. It doesn't look like he is. So we've got a question here around not just ranked choice voting, but some other issues with respect to the bipartisan support that they may carry at the legislature. I'll just speak briefly to ranked choice voting. We have always, until this year, enjoyed bipartisan support around the local options measure. It's had bipartisan support in the House and Senate. It has not this year. And in fact, as I think George Beck had mentioned, there's an effort to repeal and ban ranked choice voting in Minnesota carried in the Minnesota Senate. So we find that very unfortunate indeed. And I think we can just recognize that there has been a growing attack on our democratic processes and institutions in a partisan fashion, and it doesn't favor Minnesota voters. So we're hopeful that over time that will change, and we will certainly have the kind of bipartisan support we need, not just for ranked choice voting, but for the other measures as well. And we just encourage you all to contact your legislators, whether or not they're Republican or Democrat, and say, these issues are really important to me, and we want you to move those forward. And apologies for mischaracterizing where people are at. Liz Boldon is from Rochester. Be clear about that. Other questions that people may have, put them in Slack. Oh, we have a question here about the national popular vote. I believe some of the legislators here are on that bill. Can you just raise your hand and unmute yourself and speak to where that's at? Another really critical bill that we need to get passed here in Minnesota and in all the other states until we can get to 270 electoral college votes. Senator McEwen, were you nodding your head at that one?
I have to look, I was just looking up the status of it because I don't know what the status is. I am a co-author on that bill, and as many of the people who are listening may know, that bill does go ahead and would make Minnesota part of a compact where we would honor the national popular vote with our electors. So in effect, we would make the electoral college irrelevant, as it were. It would be a sort of formality rather than a system that goes against the majority of the votes of people in the United States, and gives us a president that wasn't elected by the people. So that is what the bill does, and I have to check on the status of it. As I said, I'm not the lead author. I can't give the latest on the status.
And Senator Putnam, are you also on that bill?
I am, yes, but I also don't know where it's at. You guys probably are aware that the committee that deals with some of these issues has been pretty helpful to a lot of our efforts to expand democracy. In addition to the larger partisan issue, the specific committee has not been very helpful.
Right. I think it's fair to say that the Senate Elections Committee is hearing none of these pro-voter reforms this year.
I did just look it up real quick, and it does show it was the first bill that I signed as a new senator. It was pretty fun. Yeah, I think we were together when we were talking about it. And it has been languishing in the State Government Finance and Policy and Elections Committee since January 11th.
Correct. And what is the number of that bill, Senator McEwen?
It is Senate File 30.
All right, yeah, an early bill. Great. And Representative Wolgamott, one more time here. Are you on? He did text me to say he was on.
Hello.
See, there he is.
Hello. I don't know why my connection is so bad, but really being a part of the conversation, I'm so proud to partner with FairVote Minnesota and all these important policies. More powerful in the is for a healthcare education structure. And we're doing
Representative Wolgamott, it looks like your connection is just too weak to communicate through. So we apologize for that. But we'll make sure that we have an opportunity to get some remarks from you in writing and then send them out to the group, which I'd love to do. I also want to highlight a question from Maureen Reed with respect to the bipartisanship of some of these reforms and ranked choice voting in particular. If you attended the hearing around the bill to ban ranked choice voting, you would have heard from a former GOP chair in Utah speaking very much in favor of ranked choice voting and Utah's efforts to advance ranked choice voting in that state. They've already passed the local options bill. We've not been able to do that. They're on their way to pass the statewide bill as well. So it is specific here to Minnesota that we have in particular a Senate Elections Committee chaired by someone who is just not going to hear these bills. And we hope that that does change in the near future so that we can advance some of this. But do know that there are bipartisan support efforts around the country for some of these measures, and that's really important for us to know. So I'm not seeing a whole lot of other questions, and it's coming on 5 o'clock. So I'd like to just simply call on our Deputy Director, Liz Johnson, to close for us and let us know how we can take action around our work here at FairVote Minnesota and around the work of so many of the other reforms that we talked about here tonight. And know that we are going to send you in an email when we thank you for being here tonight, a list of all the bills and their numbers and status. We are tracking that and we'll send that to you so that you can look them up, contact your legislators around them and get engaged. Liz?
Hi, I'm Liz. I'm Liz, and I am in Duluth. I've just got Jean thinking everybody's from Duluth.
True.
thanks everybody for being here tonight. And it's just, these conversations are really helpful to keep up energy and momentum and just feeding the soul, if anything else, about this work, because it is difficult right now, but we will get there. So there's nothing more important than supporting these bills. And I do want to let you know that there's a hearing coming up this Wednesday at 8:30 in the House. And the link will be put in the chat, and it will be in your follow-up email to hear the ranked choice voting bill number House File 89. And it's Wednesday, like I said, Wednesday morning at 8:30. There's a link here so you can contact the committee members and submit testimony directly to that committee. And please volunteer and contact your legislators and contribute to all of these great organizations if you can. And we are hosting 2 more democracy town halls in March. Next Sunday with Congressman Dean Phillips, and the Sunday after that with Congresswoman Ilhan Omar. And so please let your friends know if you think this was a good experience, and tell them to get thee to a democracy town hall. So.
Thank you, Liz. And I do want to just emphasize when she says engage, every time you contact your legislator or the Secretary of State or the governor, anyone who really matters to getting these bills passed, it matters significantly. And you being here tonight shows that your commitment is real. You're spending a whole hour talking about these issues. We wish we could do many more. And if you have a group you would like us to present to, that's one of the ways that you can engage. So we are all about spreading the word. Please engage that way. I want to give a final shout out and thank you to all of the elected officials with us at all levels of government, helping to make our democracy work. You have stepped up. You are serving, you are putting yourself on the line to represent people on all issues, and most importantly, about democracy itself. And we couldn't be more thankful for your service. So thank you. And thank you for everyone for being with us tonight. Go enjoy the rest of the day, missing an hour with daylight savings time. Again, we're all grateful, and we will be in touch with an email about next steps. See you all on Wednesday. Have a good evening.
Thank you.